Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 27 on warfare. And this video is another case study, and we're looking at the Iraq war of, the invasion in 2003 until roughly 2010, 2011, when all the troops, or most of the troops, left Iraq. Now, again, of course, we're concentrating on changes. It's the most modern war that we look at. This series of videos started way back in medieval times, and hopefully I've shown you how warfare has changed. This is the final video, ladies and gentlemen, where we're actually covering all of the information needed in the exam syllabus. So we're getting towards the end, you'll be pleased to hear. Iraq, 2003, our most modern war. It was a coalition, mainly led by America, the USA, who had about 160,000 troops in Iraq, boots on the ground, supported by the United Kingdom, who had about 40,000 troops on the ground, and other countries as well in a coalition. It was an asymmetric war, or, to use another word, an unequal war. I talked about that back in video 22 if you want to go back and check that. America and UK and other modern countries were very, very advanced compared to Iraq, which was not quite as advanced. We were able to use our high technology, as I'll explain in this video. Now, first thing, why did America, UK and others decide it was a good idea to invade Iraq? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one, they wanted to defeat/replace Iraq's leader, a man called Saddam Hussein. At the time, many people feared that the Iraqi regime under Saddam Hussein's leadership was developing WMD, weapons of mass destruction, whether that be nuclear, chemical, biological. Now, none were ever found, but some people thought at the time that they were being developed. It was part of the American president, a man called George Bush, his war on terror, following on from the attack on the Twin Towers in 2001. So they're the reasons why the war actually took place. What actually happened in the war? Well, we can divide it into two stages. Stage one is the attack. So I need my modern helmet. Okay, the attack, stage one. This went very, very well, very successfully for the coalition. Their strategy was based on shock and awe, hitting the enemy with a huge amount of powerful weapons. They had a strategy which was shortened to C4 ISR. Now, what does that mean? 4 C's: command, control, communication, and computers. ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Well, straight away we see a change. A war based on computers compared to the old weapons of war based on, for example, swords or axes or shields. Different type of weapon, different type of warfare. This more modern warfare, ladies and gentlemen, very much based around technology. So, let's have a look. Before the invasion, of course, there was preparation. Aerial surveillance, drones, reconnaissance, the use of satellites. Britain used SatNet 4. They're basically using satellites up in space. What for? Well, to take photographs, to gain information of the enemy's troop movements, to read the messages amongst the enemy, intercept their communications. We use SatNet 4. America had 50 other satellites. So we can see that knowledge is power. Compare that as a change. Go back 200 years. 1815, the Battle of Wellington. Oh, not the Battle of Wellington, come on. Dearie me. The Battle of Waterloo, led by Wellington, Well, how could he gain knowledge about what was happening? Easy, he stood up on a hill. How basic is that? But that's all he had. Compare standing on a hill to taking photographs from space. Computers, technology, satellites. Can you see the difference? So, aerial reconnaissance or surveillance. Then, prepare the battlefield. F-117 fighter planes and bombers dropping 900 kilogram bombs on the Iraqi army leaders to cause major disruption. 40 Tomahawk missiles aimed at bases and intelligence headquarters. Well, again, we see a change. An axe, later called a tomahawk in the Native Americans of the 17 and 1800s, that's a weapon. Of course it is, the tomahawk. But then, of course, we get Tomahawk missiles, which can kill huge numbers of people. Again, we see the change there, based on technology. Then, once you've dropped your missiles, send in your special forces aimed to take over key important places, installations like airports, gas and oil terminals, restricting the movement, restricting the power of the enemy. So you prepare the battlefield. Then, of course, air attack. March and April 2003, daily targeted air attacks. Over 30,000 bombs were dropped. 70% of them were what we call smart bombs. They're supposed to be more accurately targeted towards key areas. We'll compare that to, for example, World War II and the Blitz, where maybe the bombs were just dropped in an area. Smart bombs, more advanced, based on technology. And finally, when you've done all of that, prepared the battlefield, air attack, you then send in your ground troops, the infantry, ground attack. And on the 21st of March 2003, 200,000 ground troops were sent in, mainly American, some British, supported by aircraft, helicopters, mobile artillery, tanks. The US Army headed towards the capital, Baghdad. The British Army headed to another important city called Basra. Stage 1, the attack, the invasion. Well, it was all over in about 2 or 3 weeks, ladies and gentlemen. The Americans and the British and others, coalition forces, it was very, very successful. They met their objectives. Key point, of course, key question for us. Why was stage 1, why was the attack so successful? Have you got any ideas? Any? Well, to help you, ladies and gentlemen, some factors to help you get to understand the gist of the answer. Can you see what I've done there? Gist. There are 2 key factors. Government spending, improved technology. That might help you to remember the factors why stage 1 of the Iraq war was so important. You get to the gist of the matter. Government spending, improved technology, GIST. Well, let's take improved technology first. The importance of this really high-level technology. I mentioned earlier the planes, the F-117. Well, because of its shape, the way it was designed, because of the material in which it was made, it could not really be detected by Iraqi radar. What a huge advantage that would be for the planes and the pilots. Advances of technology. The Tornado plane, 80% of its bombs were smart bombs, allegedly more accurately targeted. Some did go astray, but most of the bombs are more accurately aimed and targeted at important targets. As I said earlier, compare that to World War II and the Blitz, when bombs were just dropped in an area. Can we see technology has advanced? The tornadoes were using something called paveway bombs, using global positioning satellites. Not 100% accurate, as I've said, but certainly quite accurate. We had something called the Storm Shadow, heat-guided cruise missiles, again aiming directly towards key areas. I mentioned tanks earlier. Well, tanks, of course, those of you who remember the previous video, they were first introduced in the Battle of the Somme, 1916, where they could do about 2, 3, 4 miles an hour. Well, of course, the Challenger tanks that the British used in the Iraq War almost 100 years later are far, far more advanced. They can travel much quicker. They've got much more thick and impenetrable armour. They also had night vision. They could fire 8 shells per minute. These shells were laser guided. The tanks would work with the air support, and the Challenger tanks were very, very successful. In this first stage, the attack, only 2 Challenger tanks were lost, and one of those was by friendly fire, accidentally hit by its own side. Compared to the Iraq tanks, they had T-55s, but they'd been made in 1958, ladies and gentlemen. They were almost 50 years old. Now, in modern terms, they were absolutely pathetic. The Iraqi aircraft barely even got off the ground because they knew if they took off and fought against these new aircraft from the coalition, they would easily be destroyed. So there is an imbalance there. Remember what I said about an unequal war, both on the ground with the tanks and in the air. To show that, here we had a full-scale war. Let's have a look at the casualties. In stage 1, when most of the fighting was done, America lost, dead, unfortunately, 139 soldiers. Britain killed 33. Iraq, an estimate, because we can't be sure, anywhere from about 3,500 up to about 7,000. So we see a huge difference based on technology. But also, remember GIST, government spending. Money explains the outcome of the first stage of the Iraq War. I mentioned the Challenger tank. Well, each tank cost £4 million. In 2003, just the first year of the war, America spent $50 billion. Every year that Britain was in Iraq, we spent £1 billion. We were using our wealth to help win the war. Stage 1, very successful for those reasons. But then we moved to stage 2. Now, stage 2 was not as successful for the coalition. I'll explain what happened, and then you can have a think of why it wasn't as successful. Stage 2 lasted from about 2004 to 2011. And it wasn't real set-piece battles, as in stage 1. It was a different type of warfare. It was a warfare of insurgency, sometimes called guerrilla warfare. Now, stage 1 lasted about 3 weeks. Stage 2, 8 years. What do we mean by insurgency, this different type of warfare? Well, not big armies. When the coalition invaded in 2003, they were facing an Iraqi army of certainly 370,000, 400, 500,000 men. But men enough weren't enough to sort of destroy and defeat the huge technologically advanced weaponry of the coalition. But stage 2 is different. Here we have smaller groups, different mobile groups of soldiers, often not necessarily wearing their uniform, using hit and run tactics. Some people call it terrorist tactics, using things like car bombs, IEDs, improvised explosive device, leave something at the side of the road and then explode it as someone drives past or someone walks past from far away. You're not actually fighting face to face. You're using hit and run. Some people call it sneaky. Some people call it cowardly. But it's very, very effective. And then, of course, they can blend in with the civilians. So it was far more difficult for the coalition to deal with these type of tactics. All of their weaponry, their satellites, their computers, their planes that the radar couldn't see, their missiles, all of that, it's not very effective against hit and run guerrilla style tactics. It was very helpful for stage 1, the attack, not so helpful for stage 2, the guerrilla insurgency. Try to remember it like this. All of the weapon benefits and advantages that the coalition had made it easy to capture Iraq, but all of those weapons meant it was hard to control Iraq. That might go into your head there. Now, to prove what I've just said, when the United Kingdom withdrew in 2009, we had 179 soldiers who'd been killed. When America withdrew 1 year later, in 2010, they had 4,400 soldiers who'd been killed. Remember, they'd only lost 139 in the attack stage, and now they're over 4,400. That shows how effective these new tactics were, and how all of their technology and all of their weapons didn't really help them very much to defeat this new style of tactics. Warfare had changed. As well as 4,400 killed, America also had 32,000 wounded. So we can see the effectiveness of the different style of warfare. Stage 2, guerrilla warfare. So that's the Iraq War done. And ladies and gentlemen, we've now finished the syllabus on warfare. We've gone from medieval times right the way to modern times. I hope the videos will help you, particularly when you get towards your exam and you can use them for your revision. Just one final thing before we finish warfare totally. A final video. The next video, what I'll do is I'll have a look at the actual exam questions, and hopefully I'll give you some advice and show you how to do well on the warfare exam questions. So that's coming soon. As ever, I hope it's been useful. Okay, speak to you soon. All the best now.